Hello, everybody. Welcome to our study in Genesis. We will be in Genesis chapter 38 tonight, as is our tradition. We'll do a quick review, and then we're going to dive into this section. Don't worry, we're going to talk about 37 right now. 37, I said, is one of the most important chapters in the book of Genesis, and because it sets the stage, which many of these chapters do, for the next story. And this is not just the next story, this is a very, very big story. This chapter 37 sets the stage for the next book in the Bible, the book of Exodus. All right, this is where Joseph has his dreams. Yeah. I like Joseph. We all do. All right, what were Joseph's dreams about?
That his father and his brothers would have to bow down.
Yeah, his father and his brothers would be bowing down to him. That's right. Of course, his father and his brothers were thrilled and happy to hear this.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So the sarcasm didn't go very far. Everybody picked up on it. And, they were really upset. What did his brothers do about this?
Sold him off.
And told their father what?
That he was dead.
He was dead. They took his coat, his beautiful coat that his father had given him, and they dipped it in goat's blood. And we use the word envy, more specifically, right? They were envious of him. These men are not unknown to murder. All right. We know the story about Shechem. Yes. All right, what they wiped out the entire town. So there's a lot of sin going on here. But God is a redeeming God. He is a God of promise. He will fulfill his promises regardless. So as we go into this chapter tonight, as the story is, Jacob, Joseph's father, believes his son Joseph, which is the firstborn of the woman he really loved, Rachel. And he's now dead. There's in his mind. There was a younger brother, Benjamin, who's left over. And of course, it was Benjamin's birth that killed Rachel again. So there's a lot of bittersweet things here for Jacob. A lot. But we're going to leave the story of Jacob and Joseph just for one chapter. And then the rest of the book of Genesis is all about Joseph, either directly or indirectly. And so tonight we will talk about one of the brothers, and that's Judah. And we're going to find out that despite bad things, because bad things happen in this chapter, we discover we're going to finish the night by doing the who's who that Janice was talking about earlier. We'll do some who's who, and it's going to be a very interesting who's who. Because let's just tickle this one out there for you for a minute. Remember, there are 12 sons of Jacob. Okay? One is definitely a favorite. All right? Joseph is Jacob's favorite. Okay? Joseph does great things. Now keep in mind, through one of the 12 sons comes the lineage to King David, and then eventually Jesus Christ. Of the 12 sons, who does God choose to have the great honor to be the ancestor of Jesus Christ?
I know.
We're going to let Gail answer that later on. Okay? Because I'm setting this up. All right? There's a favorite son. Okay? And we'll see what God actually does. It's very interesting. We also get back into names tonight. All right? Where do the Jewish people get their name from? All right? That's going to be a lot of fun too. So there's a lot that goes on. But this is another soap opera story. It sure is. All right? We're going to see some strange things. But we're going to talk a little also about one of people's favorite books in the Bible, and one of the few books named after a woman. We will read a little bit about Ruth, because we got to talk about this really strange practice that a lot of people in this time, that went all the way to the time of Christ, because we're going to read about Jesus in Matthew also about the same practice, because he gets challenged with it. And so we'll visit the book of Ruth tonight, and we'll visit the book of Matthew. And you'll see that the Bible is all connected. It's all connected. Okay? So with that build up, Are we ready to rock? We're ready to roll? We're ready to cruise? We're ready to bruise? We're ready to make it happen like it was yesterday? Okay, that's a yes. All right, Genesis chapter 38, we're beginning in verse 1. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hirah. There, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. Judah married her and lay with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son whose name was She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, lie with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so he put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For Judah thought his youngest son may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hirah, the Adullamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to En-Naim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had now grown up, so that's the third son, right, had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he said. Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked. He said, what pledge shall I give you? Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand, she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put her widow's clothes on again. Meanwhile, Judah sent to the young goat from his friend the Adullamite and ordered to give his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, where is the shrine prostitute who is beside the road at En-Naim? There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here, they said. So he went back to Judah and said, I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here. Then Judah said, let her keep what she has, or will becoming laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to death. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these, she said. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah. And he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist, and said, this one came out first. But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out. And she said, so this is how you have broken out. And he was named Perez. Then his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread at his wrists, and he was given the name Zerah. Alrighty. So let's try to put this one together.
Perez means breaking out, and Zerah means scarlet or brightness.
Very nice. All right, verse 1. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hirah. All right, and verse 2. So let's just stick with verse 1. Judah leaves his brothers. Previous chapter, Joseph left his brothers, but they left under completely different circumstances. Right?
Yes.
Judah leaves on his own accord. Joseph is sent into slavery, sold into slavery. So we see a very, very different thing just to start out the chapter. All right. Then Judah moves down and starts hanging out with the Canaanites. And also takes a wife from the Canaanites. Is there a problem here?
They were told not to marry Canaanites.
Yeah, exactly. Stay away from the Canaanites. In fact, this is why Rebekah told her son Jacob to go to Paddan Aram, all right, so he can marry somebody within their own family, their own kind, not Canaanites, because his brother Esau had been marrying Canaanites. All right, so this was one of those dun 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 moments. All right, remember God is faithful, right? He's the God of promise. All right, continuing in verse 2. He married her and lay with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son whose name was Too bad. Bummer for right? Mm-hmm. Okay. She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. Bummer for Onan. She gave birth to still another son, and his name is Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. All right, verse 6. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. For Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. That's all we're told. That's it. We don't get any details. We don't know. Yeah, well, they're all doing wicked in the sight of God. This guy must have been super wicked, at least by our standards. But normally you hear things like, so-and-so was killed in battle or something, they die some other way. God puts these people to death. That's pretty blunt. All right.
They're really wicked.
Yep. Okay, so then let's look at, so is put to death. Verse 8. Then Judah said to Onan, lie with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother. We're going to come back and deal a little bit more in depth with that. Okay. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. We'll explain that. So whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother.
God was mad.
Now, this was not an uncommon practice. This is birth control. This is early birth control that men would do if they wanted to avoid having any more children. All right? Children cost money, right? Especially when and they're not a lot of help, especially when they're very young. So sometimes men did. Or if men were sleeping with women who weren't their wives, such as the prostitutes and things like that, they would do that as well. Keep in mind, this is all before the law. This is before Moses. These things that we're looking at that we know are wrong today, or even wrong biblically, there is no Bible. They're living by the law of the land. Okay, there's right and wrong, but there's many things that they were doing back then, even good men thought were right, that we know are wrong. Okay. He doesn't want to he doesn't want to impregnate Tamar, and there's a reason why, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we study these other portions. But in verse 10, what he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so he put him to death also. Jiminy crickets. That was it? Okay, well, there's a reason. God's got plans. He doesn't like men interfering with them.
Well, actually, he was killing babies by doing that.
Well, semen is just a portion of what you need to have to be able to create a life. But he was preventing a baby from being born.
Yeah.
All right, so I think there you're correct. Verse 11.
But he was also, he did it because he said it wouldn't be his baby.
Yes.
But it would be his baby.
No, he would give this. We'll study this a little bit more here in a moment. He was having children for his brother.
Yeah, he was the father.
Yeah, but that's not how the law looked at it. They would look at this as though this was their son, his brother's child, and as a result, get the inheritance. All right, so remember, he's now the oldest brother, But his dead brother's inheritance now would be given to this boy, not to him.
Oh, all right.
All right? Okay? And so that's how they determined it. And we're going to see this going all the way into the New Testament. In fact, let me just get through this next portion, and we'll have some fun with it. Judah then said, okay, so now 2 boys are dead. There's 1 more to go. He's a kid. Okay, Shelah. Okay. So now you got Judah saying, what's happening to my sons? All right? You know, they get tired. I send them to Tamar. Next thing you know, they're dead. So now he's got his third and last son, his only son. And he's thinking, all right, how do I fulfill the law and keep my son? Okay. Verse 11. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For Judah thought that his last son may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in his father's house. So in other words, he's lying. Judah is lying to Tamar. He is setting her up, making a promise he has no intentions on keeping. And for good reason. He's doing a wrong thing for a right reason. That still means wrong, correct? Okay, so and he's not trusting God. Okay, so there's a lot of problems here. All right. This is a common practice that when a son dies without any children, the next son marries the widow and bears children with her for the dead brother. This is not uncommon. Let's read a little portion of Ruth, okay, and then I want to read the portion in Matthew where Jesus gets challenged on this and how he answers it, and then we'll come back to Genesis, okay? All right, so now we got to do your Bible finding skills. This is going to be easy. When you memorize books of the Bible, it's always helped to have it be a little bit mnemonic. Okay, it kind of goes like this. Now, watch the fun part here in a second. So it's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. All right, stop. Joshua, Judges, Ruth. See, if you use Judges as a verb, it's kind of like Joshua is actually judging on Ruth. So it's easy to remember. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. So keep a hand in Genesis. Turn to your right a little bit until you go Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. All right, and we're going to be in Ruth. I'm so funny. I'm turning to it like I couldn't find it. I have my little marker in there. We're going to be in chapter 4. This is Ruth chapter 4. Yeah. And take your time. Yeah, this is a great love story. They made a movie out of it. This is a great love story. And you get to meet another precursor of Jesus Christ in Boaz. How's everybody doing?
Good.
So pastors like to say amen when you get there. Are you there, hon? All right, good. Starting in Ruth chapter 4, verse 1. All right, now, but before I go there, just as a reminder, the stories here in the book of Ruth is about a woman named Ruth who was a Moabitess. She was not a part of the Jewish nation. All right, she's one of the, like coming from the Canaanites. She had married a son of a woman named Naomi. Both pretty famous names. Okay, that son died, and Naomi was going to return back to her own people, the Jewish people. And Ruth said, "Wherever you go, I will go. Whatever you do, I will do." And she committed to caring for her and to take care of her. All right. So it's a neat story to read about Ruth. So now Ruth is back in this land that she's not. She's a stranger and she's an alien in. So she's very susceptible to the men in those places to take advantage of her. The laws didn't protect her as much as they protected the other Jewish women. One man named Boaz sees her in the field working and instructs his men not to leave her alone and protects her. Well, he eventually falls in love with her. Okay. So now the question is, though, Ruth's husband had died. So what does the law say? Well, then there's whoever's the next son. If she didn't have any children, whoever's the next son, all right, brother, to her husband has to marry her. Well, that guy wasn't available either. So then there's a thing called a protector, all right, or a kinsman redeemer. Kin, right? We know the word kin, right? This is where it comes from, kinsman, redeemer. There's somebody else in the family who has authority now to marry Ruth. And she's tied to Naomi. So here's how this all goes. And it all has everything to do with land and property. Unfortunately, that's how women were seen. They were seen sort of as property. Okay, again, Jesus is the great, freer of women in his time. All right, so let's read chapter 4, verse 1. Now, Boaz is trying to figure out how he can marry Ruth. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there. When the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here." And they did so. Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here, in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line." The kinsman redeemer says, "I will redeem it." Oh, so now he's going to get Ruth. Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth, the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with this property." See that? Okay. Verse 6. At this, the kinsman redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." This is the same reason why the second son of Judah says he does not want to have children by Tamar. He's afraid he loses everything to what would be his biological son, but the legal son of his dead brother. All right? Still all happening right there.
It goes back to Boaz. Right?
So now it goes to Boaz. And Boaz is planning this.
Yeah.
Hence the reason why he puts this out. Verse 7, now in the earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the kinsman redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself," and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all those at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah." See, you guys know Genesis. You know Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you have a standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Ooh. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Ooh. I read that recently. Didn't I read that someplace? All right. See how that story goes? All right. We will come back to Ruth, chapter 4, but next we're going to travel to the book of Matthew. So now you're going to go all the way to the right. Okay? You're going to go all the way to the New Testament. So you got a lot of pages to go. Take a big hunk of the book and just turn it to the left. Don't go page by page like Mike's doing.
No, I'm already there.
Are you already there? All right, so now you're looking for what chapter?
Yeah.
We'll be in chapter 22.
Oh, well, now I got to go.
Where are we going?
Matthew in the New Testament. So a whole bunch to the right. Just take out. Yeah, you go. Keep going. You're still in the Old Testament. Yeah, you're getting close. You probably went by. And Matthew is the first book in the New Testament. Yep.
22.
Yeah. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. You know how it goes. All right. Yeah, Janice, you're going to have to go a lot further to the right. Yep. And you got a lot. There you go. Much more. Right now you're probably in Psalms. Now you're in the low. Right. No. She's still got to go right. Yep. Keep going. Okay. Yep. You're still getting. You're almost there.
It's Matthew.
Okay. Now you need chapter 22.
22. I'm not going to need it.
21. No, 22, right? 22. How's everybody doing?
Okay. Amen.
Matthew 22. We're going to be in verse 23.
11. Matthew 11.
That was right.
No, you're in Matthew 16. It's Matthew 22.
You were close.
23. Matthew,
Yes, so we're in 22, verse 23.
Matthew 22, verse 23. Right here.
All right.
Matthew 22,
Thank
verse
you.
23.
So we just traveled thousands of years.
Marriage at the resurrection.
Yeah, marriage at the resurrection. All right. So now Jesus is being tested. All right. All the learned men of Jerusalem, they're all trying to trick him because he's teaching this new concept about how to understand Moses and the law. And he's talking about the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven. And so what happens is you have these men coming up. Now, if you remember, we talked a little bit about the Sadducees when we were studying the book of Acts. The Sadducees were key leaders at the time. They were kind of helping run all the religious activities at the time. So we're in verse 23. That same day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him with a question. Teacher, they said, Rabbi. Teacher, they said, Moses told us that if a man dies without having children, his brother must marry the widow and have children for him. See, there it is, even in Jesus' time. Now, there were 7 brothers among us. The first one married and died, and since he had no children, he left his wife to his brother. The same thing happened to the second and third brother, right on down to the 7th. Finally, the woman died. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will be of the 7, since all of them were married to her? They're saying, so who in heaven? In heaven, who is she married to? Because there's 7 brothers.
It'd be the next one in line, wouldn't it? Like if the first one died.
All 7 died before she died.
7 died?
No children. All 7 died, and then she dies. Who is she married to? No, wait a minute. Don't get caught up in the paradigm. Don't get caught up in... Break from it all together. What do you think Jesus is going to explain heaven? All right? You want to hear it?
No marriage in heaven.
There's no marriage in heaven. There's no men, there's no women, there's no Jew, there's no Gentile. We're all the same. Here we go. Verse 29. You ready? Jesus replied, You are in error because you do not know the Scriptures or the power of God. Amen to that. At the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. But about the resurrection of the dead, you have not read what God said to you. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Verse 33, when the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. All right. Okay, so here we were in Genesis. And we read in Ruth, and then we finished in Matthew. But you can see how important this law is, this requirement. But you see how Jesus says God's above all of this, and that we're in heaven, we're all equal. We're all equal. Praise God. All All right, so let's go on back to Genesis. Oh, I love that term, back to Genesis. All right, we're going back to Genesis. All right, I gotta start getting Gail ready to give her answer. All right. I know. We bounce around the Bible a little bit, but that's how it works. It's pretty cool. So now we're down in verse 12.
I'm not even in Genesis.
Okay, so we are in Genesis 38. We're in Genesis 38. We're back to, so we're going to be in verse 12.
Okay.
So Tamar's living, under the authority now of Judah. That's what it means to live in the house. It doesn't mean the physical location. It means under his protection. He's acting as her father. All right? I want to make sure that everybody caught up. Yep. All right, you all set?
Yep.
So we're in verse 12. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the men who were sharing his sheep. And his friend Hira, the Edolamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to share his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. Dun, 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 dun. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law. He went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you, she asked. Okay, in other words, what's my payment? I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he said. Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it, she asked. In other words, she wanted something down. Okay. He said, what pledge should I give you? Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand, she answered. So this is like giving an ID card. Make sense? His driver's license, something like that, that could be easily identify Judah. And of value to Judah. He's going to want it back. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again, so no one knew anything about who was what. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enaim? There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here, they said. That's even a very special prostitute. This is sick. This goes back into Jesus' time too. All right, there's the temple of Diana. All right, in the New Testament, there were actual temple prostitutes, and to have sex with them meant that you were closer to God. It was a spiritual element. It's very, very sad, sick, weird, lots of weird stuff. All right, again, this is why my mother absolutely believed this was a true story. She said, if you were just trying to make this stuff up, you wouldn't have made it this bad. Okay, all right. So now in verse 22. So he went back to Judah and said, I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here. Then Judah said, let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughing stock. In other words, everybody knew everybody was doing this. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her. So he's clear of any debt. Okay? All right. Here comes that number again. About how many months, Mike?
3 months.
3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution. And as a result, she is now pregnant. Let's pause for a second. When we were talking about what happened at Shechem, we talked about the Old Testament law about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Okay? And we said that, gee, boy, the guys at Shechem would have loved to have that law. Because Jesus teaches against that. He said, no, actually, we're supposed to forgive. We don't want to be eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But boy, they should have taken the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth of Shechem. Guess what? Same thing for Tamar. She would take also an eye for an eye. All right? Just because she had prostituted herself. Okay? But there's one little problem. By the way, this is very interesting in so many times. You can talk about this in so many different ways. But one of the problems we have with prostitution today is that the laws seem to always against the woman, not against the guy. He's as guilty, if not more. But, yeah. So these are those issues. So anyways, so now we're in, still in the end of 24. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to death. Not stoned.
I know, burned to death.
Horrible death. A horrible death.
I know.
Yeah?
That's
Okay.
how my girlfriend died.
Yeah. Well, I was in a horrible fire. I was in where a lot of men died.
We
I almost
were,
got killed.
Graduating from grammar school,
Hmm.
and we were talking about going to Durfee and the dances and all that, big shots. Somebody came down and told me her house was on fire, and she lived on Rainy Street off of County, and
Sure.
I lived on Bound Street, which is off of County.
Right.
And I said to the firemen, can't you help her? They said no. She died in her window holding the curtain.
Oh.
They could not save her.
Yep.
And every time I went by that house, of course, I lived there, I had to go by that house, and my father said, you know, you got to get over this, but how, when you go by that house all the time and see her in the window holding the curtain, and the fireman's right there, couldn't help her. So that's when I lived with my grandmother, because that was the only way, because I wouldn't have to go by that house.
Right.
And I was nowhere near the house, so I could get over it.
Yep.
But I still couldn't get over it. Every
No.
time I hear of a fire, somebody died in a fire, that picture comes right to you.
Yep.
'Cause we were only, 13, 12, 13.
Yeah, it's
Going
horrible.
on 13.
It's easily one of the worst ways to die. Horrible way to die. So, but this is the law. You know, she's in prostitution, which again is strange. Now, again, remember he's the cause of a prostitute. Right? He's the one that's going to them, and then turn right around and have the prostitute that he had be killed. Well, I think there's a possibility. That's the reason I kept on calling them shrine prostitutes. They were supposed to be. All right, so it's really weird and really strange, and also.
He starts out, he wants her to be burned till he finds out who.
Oh, this is the whole twist. This is the twist in a second. Oh, yeah. So,
guilty one.
yeah, but we'll get into that in a second. But I want to make sure you understand how misogynist this is.
Yeah.
All right, this is terrible how women are being treated. But even today, again, like I mentioned about the laws as they are, I think things are changing. Now, again, if a man's caught, enticing a prostitute, he's in big trouble, as in big trouble, if not more.
Yeah, they could be brought into.
Yeah. Oh no, they can get arrested. The whole element.
Yeah.
All right. Verse 25, and here's as the worm turns. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these. She said she had. See if you recognize whose sealing cord and staff these are. All right. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Judah. Now watch Judah. Watch how Judah responds. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah, and he did not sleep with her again. So, what do you think of Judah's response?
So,
His response is selfish?
No, I think it was the right response.
Yeah, he
Because
admits.
He knew what he did.
yeah.
He admits.
Big deal. He didn't sleep with her again.
Oh, that's also
what
important.
happens to the baby?
Well, slow down, slow. Oh, no. You'll read about that in a second, and then we'll finish in Ruth.
Yeah, I know.
Remember my original question.
Oh, yeah.
Which of the 12 sons does Jesus come from? And I built up Joseph, right? Joseph's the favorite. Joseph's going to be this great man in Egypt. Joseph is the guy. I mean, right? Joseph? All right. So, first of all, Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I. Okay? And he admits the reason why she did what she did was because of him.
Right.
Not that, he didn't have it coming. Because he cheated her. And God.
Yeah, he did.
Big time. So, again, the right thing for the wrong, the wrong thing for the right reason? Am I saying it again right? The wrong thing for the right reason. Still wrong. Still wrong. Okay? But this seems to be how God responds to this. I'm very, very grateful for him. All right? He is going to fulfill his promises regardless of how we do things. He did not sleep with her again means that he didn't take her for his wife. He wasn't going to defile her. And we really don't know. We don't know if she wound up, being married to the third son or not. We don't know any of that. And that's how this finishes. Verse 27. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. That's a big deal. Okay? You all know I work with pregnancy resource centers helping women who are in an unplanned pregnancy keep their babies. We don't always talk women out of an abortion. Many, many women that we meet with still have abortions. When we try to get them to see an ultrasound so they can see the baby in their womb, sometimes they still abort. If they find out they're having twins, they hardly ever abort. There's something special about twins. They're rare. All right? They're rare. And that's another thing too, the idea of raising twins. So they're special. And a lot of women will not get an abortion if they have twins. Very, very special. As she was giving birth, one of them put his hand out, so the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew it back his hand, his brother came out. And she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was given the name Zerah. Okay, now, you don't have to turn to Ruth. You can if you'd like. Now I'm going to go back over to Ruth. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Okay? Just helping you memorize your books. I am going to, as we talked with Janice about, I'm going to do the who's who. And I'm going to need a drum roll in a few minutes. Because we're going to find out through whose line King David, the greatest king of all times, Melech David, and eventually Jesus himself, which line is it? Okay, remember you have 12 choices. All right, we're not going to let Gail answer. Okay, so you got all 12 brothers. You got Benjamin and Dan and Naphtali. You got Reuben. You got Levi. You got Judah. You got Joseph. Which of the brothers does the line of King David come through and eventually Jesus himself? Would anybody like to venture a guess? No. Janice says no. Terry? No, you're not putting any chips on the table there? No, she's not betting. She's keeping her money. All right, so I've set Lynn up, and she's going with Joseph. Michael?
No.
You're not going to take any guesses either?
No guesses.
All right, Mrs. Conrad. The answer is through Judah.
Wow, really?
Let's read. All right, if you want to go to Ruth chapter 4.
I was thinking that, and I said, nah, it can't be him.
It's right. It can't be him. But why is the guy keeps killing these guys? All right, and then everybody gets into trouble because nobody's impregnating Tamar. I mean, then Judah's going to kill her, pregnant with his sons.
But she doesn't know, though.
Oh, he knows. Well, he doesn't know that. That's right. He doesn't know she's pregnant with his sons. But but in actuality, he almost did. All right. So we're in Ruth chapter 4. Remember, if you're looking at things like the New Testament, you're nowhere near. I'm just going to read it to you. I
found no problem the other time.
Okay. So this is the genealogy of David. All right, I'll read that fun part again. Verse 13, Ruth chapter 4, verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law," he's talking to Naomi, not Ruth. These women are talking to Naomi about what God has done because Boaz has married Ruth. "For your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than your 7 sons has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son. This is Ruth's son. And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This, then, is the family line of Perez. This is Judah's son, remember? Through Tamar, one of the twins. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Amminadab. Amminadab, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz. Boaz, the father of Obed. Obed, the father of Jesse. Jesse, the father of David. And David eventually would be the father, the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of Yeshua ben Yosef, Jesus the Messiah, through Judah and Tamar.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the line is from Judah. It's because the other ones lost the blessing.
Yep.
You go back and tell them about the other brothers.
No, honey, you're on a roll. Please feel free.
Yeah, but the thing is, dear, it's like, I don't remember the names. It's been
Okay, yeah, but just keep in mind, we still don't know why not Joseph. Oh, I know why. Who did Joseph marry?
the Egyptian.
Ta-da! Okay, so we're still seeing this, things not quite working out right. Okay, so, but it is through Tamar, all right? And remember, Judah married a Canaanite woman and gave birth, all right, and to their sons, and Tamar comes. So, anyways, that's how interesting this is, and how God prevails.
Yeah, but Reuben was the firstborn.
He was.
Yeah, but what did he do to lose
His birthright.
the lineage?
That's going to come. We've already talked a little bit about it. It's some of the things that he did.
Right, and
makes him-
because it was the other two brothers, Simeon and
Levi, they're the ones that slaughtered at Shechem.
that killed at Shechem, so they lost
Right.
the blessing, and then it went down to
Judah.
But I don't remember what Reuben did, because he did something,
Yeah, he did.
and you're not going to tell me.
Nope. Questions and comments? No, all set. All right, it's a pretty interesting story. It's now Joseph time. It's going to be Joseph 24/7, with either directly or indirectly. Lots of fun stories. Feel free to read ahead, but we'll get started with Joseph and Potiphar's wife the next time. All right. Okay. Talk to y'all later. God bless.